So what exactly is causing the unrest and all of that?
You know what? It was actually something that I was going to talk about. It was going to be our gist for today.
Oh, fantastic.
So
Let's do
basically what was happening, of course, and I think for many people are saying, I think it was just a springboard that was being used for people to better express themselves. Our former president, right, Jacob Zuma,
Mm-hmm.
he was arrested, and he was arrested because he was held in contempt of court.
Yeah.
So the minute he turned himself in and was put in a cell, everybody now went to haywire and went crazy on that and was like, no, we're not going to stand for that and everything. And instead of them protesting, they started looting. So I think that's when everybody now came to, and they're like, but what you're doing is not in line with what has happened.
Right.
How can you going into ShopRite and taking TVs and whatnot say that you guys are protesting? And I think now that's when the issues now began to surface, and the emotions where people were like, no, it's not really so much about the fact that he has been arrested. It goes to the fact that the economy is no longer conducive for people. People are unemployed. People are unable to look after themselves. People are hungry and everything. But then again, it goes back to the same thing again, where they're like, okay, but if you guys are saying you're hungry, why aren't you hitting like places that give you food? You're burning cars, you're stealing refrigerators, you're stealing TVs, and you're doing all of that. And I mean, for us, it was an interesting thing, because normally when people are protesting, if you can go back to what happened at the NSARS protest, what happened there was when law enforcement was sent there, they did something about the situation. I'll actually share a video with you where in our case, the police were just standing there. They couldn't do anything. They literally could not fire anything. It was a later stage where if you do see some of the videos there where you see where people have opened fire with rubber bullets, many of them weren't for most of the part, many of them weren't even law enforcement. It was people that had their own kind of rifles and stuff, because other people, onlookers, business owners, and them were saying, you know what, we cannot stand for this. Our businesses are being trashed and everything. We understand that people are saying they are hungry, or they're saying that they're unable to like provide for themselves. But we as business owners are taking a lot of whiplash for what they're doing. So I think the gist that was going to be something that we were going to discuss today was I went out yesterday, of course, because as you're driving around, you have to be cautious, because I mean it's actually been quite a pandemonium.
Wait, hold on. You said you're driving around. Are you guys not supposed to be on lockdown, though?
So we are on lockdown, but that's the thing that's also just driving people crazy, because the lockdown that we're having is an adjusted lockdown.
Right.
So it didn't make sense to people that he was shutting down some things and wasn't shutting down other things. And I think this is what brought the frenzy to say the lockdown that you have that you have put into play benefits some, but it does not benefit others. And I think that's when people said, but I mean, you guys are taking us for a ride anyway. So it's going to be a laissez-faire kind of thing. We're going to do whatever it is that we need to do in order for us to survive. So some people are able to go to work lockdown was for specific people. Others could go to work. Other people could still do what they're doing, but other people were being affected. For example, they were saying that the rise of the numbers in COVID is in the nightclubs, in the clubs where people are having alcohol, or restaurants where alcohol is being consumed and whatever. Those are the majority places where numbers are rising. So those were kind of entities and stuff that were shut down. Restaurants, other kind of places. And in Pretoria, in South Africa, we've got these things where many people sell food for a living. It may not be in a restaurant because they may not be able to afford the rent. So it could be like just around the street or in like a small container. And all those things now had to shut down because food was not being allowed to be sold at that kind of level. So
now that the protests are on the way and people are going out on the streets, there's no restriction. Everybody can just come out to protest now.
Mr. T, see, this is what we're saying. It's not even a protest because nobody is out on the streets. Everybody is in a shopping mall. There's no one marching on the streets. Everybody is going into a shopping mall. So if you've got like a Lekki shopping center, they're not protesting on the streets. The roads are moving fine. Everybody is going into a complex where they can take a TV.
Then.
Exactly. That's what's happening.
Oh boy.
And now this is where now people are saying, but we don't really understand. I mean, the president spoke the other day. He addressed the nation and he said that I'm sending out the National Defense Force. The Minister of Defense says, I'm not going to send out my soldiers because you're trying to start a war in the country. So then it goes back to a thing that says, but how do we get control of the situation that's at hand? And I think many people then sat down to say, see, the problem that South Africans are having is once upon a time, the government was looking after the people. South Africans, every month, for example, I'll make an example for you. We have what we call grants. It's called grant where, for example, if you are a woman and you are unable to work, not even that you are unable, but you don't have work and you find yourself you have 4 children, the government would pay you for the 4 children that you have. Literally every month you would go and collect a stipend from the government for the children that you have. If you were a person that was injured and you are unable to work because of an injury, the government would give you a monthly stipend because you were injured and declared unfit for work. And I mean, those are some of the things that are being cut now because I mean, you can see financially, recession-wise and everything, the government tends to say that they don't have the money. And South Africans are like, no, but you're lying. You do have the money. So if you're not going to give us the money, we're going to go out and get whatever we can for ourselves in order for us to be sustained, because the life that you guys are living as government, we also want that life. And I mean, this is where the conversation came in now, because a friend of mine is actually from Nigeria. He was like, if I can look at the ratio and balance between South Africans and Nigerians, he said, see, South Africans, from the time of freedom, you guys have been given that mentality where the government gives and gives and gives and gives and gives. Whereas in Nigeria, we were brought up to work for what we have. Yeah. You don't just wake up tomorrow morning and you're like, I want a flat screen TV because other black people or people in parliament or in government have got flat screen TVs. So you guys need to install the kind of system that enables me to be able to get a flat screen TV, though they've not worked for it. So he was just saying that, I mean, to what extent and to what level does the government need to look after its people financially in order for them to understand that what you get is what you work for? Because at the end of the day, many of the people that are looting, come on, I was funny today. I went to go and see a client. And when I went to go and see a client, it was at a restaurant. And we got to the back and we were having a conversation with some of the people that were working in the kitchen at the back. And I asked the lady, I'm like, where are you from? And she told me that she was from one of the townships. And I asked her, how bad is it there? She's like, man, it's really bad. And I asked her, I'm like, be honest with me. When you got home, did you go into one of the malls and take some things? She's like, I definitely did. She's like, honestly. She was like, I got off from work, and when I got off from work, the malls were open, so definitely I went in and I took some stuff. And I was like, well, kudos to you actually for being honest. But the one thing that she said to me made me understand that the mindsets of the people are different, because I asked her, what did you take? And she's like, honestly, I went in and I took food. I didn't have time to take flat screen TVs, to take couches, to take refrigerators. Wow. I went in and I took food because that's what I need.
Wow.
So really, within Africa, you get to that point where you ask yourself, because I feel like in many different places, you'll find that the instances are similar. Because I mean, everybody has riots because they're not pleased with how the government is doing some things. But I mean, now if you want to generalize it into South Africa, because I mean, for the longest of time, they were looking after them, they were giving them some kind of stipends and whatever. And the president said, we aren't able to do this anymore, so we're going to minimize it, or we're going to cut it. On top of that, there is the job cuts and the salary cuts with COVID-19. So you get to a point where you ask yourself then, just how much is the government expected to give in order for people to be satisfied? I mean, satisfaction goes from person to person. Not everybody gets satisfied. You find people that are working now and they get paid like 1 million naira, but they'll be like, you know what, the money is never enough, you know? But I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. Everybody's got their own point of view. And I think many people have got so much to say about it now, because I mean, majority of one friend of mine was like, it's xenophobia. I'm like, no, it's not. These are South Africans.
To South Africans, like South Africans to South Africans.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so I really do wish we could go on with this conversation, but we have an interview coming up.
Of course.
But just before I let you go, right? So let's look at it like this, right? If there was a hungry, as a Christian, if you were hungry and then all of this is happening, like the person you spoke to, had to make away with food, right? If you were hungry and you're really hungry, you've been praying to God, Lord, I'm hungry, and there's this looting going on, and you find yourself in in a mall
in
like that.
Situation.
Would you take it? And if you take it, is that right or wrong?
You know what? I won't lie, because when she said that, I thought about it myself. Because I mean, at the end of the day, there are some things that you're needing, and I mean, people weren't getting arrested for it. So I'm pretty sure that many people did get up and go and get some things. I don't know if I personally would have done that, because I think in the back of my mind, the Holy Spirit would have been like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" But I mean, it was for the past few weeks. I mean, it's been going on since Saturday. So I think if people were taking every day, I think they've got enough to keep them for the whole year, quite frankly.
But I think it's still wrong, though. Just personally,
it is. It's still wrong.
Irrespective of the situation, I mean,
what happened, which was so sad. Quickly before we go, was they were looking at, because many of the businesses are insured, so the insurance by default has to pay it out. But they were looking at the statistics, Mr. Tola. They were looking at the statistics of the number of businesses that were affected, and majority of the businesses that were affected by what they were doing were black businesses. So white businesses weren't affected. If you're going to say that you are now trying to be equal and live as the whites are living, then in the back of my mind, small-minded, the one thing that you would do is you would go there because you are saying you want to live the life that they're living. But majority of the white businesses weren't affected. Black businesses were affected, and they were affected by their fellow black brothers.
Oh boy, that's some sad stuff. Really sad stuff.
You see?
Anyway, guys,
so
thank you so much, Inam, for bringing us up to speed, because I kind of mentioned this whole South African thing before you called in, and I didn't even know you were gonna really literally blog about it. So thanks for shedding some more light to make us understand exactly what's going on.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty, Inam.
No, thank you so much.
Okay then.
Alrighty then.
Bye.
Alrighty.